Hello, everybody, and welcome to another talk. Today, I'm going to be talking with Carl Peters Bond, and he's based in Biopharm in Hendy in South Wales. I'd just like to give a little bit of background about why I'm doing these talks, how I know these people. Our kind of connection's a bit of a strange one. When I was in Sri Lanka and I was studying Ayurveda, one of the doctors there was a specialist in Rakta, which is the bloodletting technique using leeches. And I was initially a bit skeptical. I mean, I didn't know much about leech other than the kind of 18th, 19th century historical background of leeches. And I just kind of, after I had the treatment done, he just offered to try it, do you want to try it? And I said, yeah, just out of curiosity. And I was quite fascinated with the work that they were doing and the results that they were getting using these leeches. And it kind of just inspired me to read up on it a little bit more. When I came back to the UK, I did a little bit of research, looking online, eventually connected with Biopharm, and I thought that I kind of invited myself, I think, as I recall, but they kindly tolerated me for a day. I just drove up there, got shown around. It was like an amazing setup, fantastic day out, and it really kind of inspired me to carry on the work Ayurvedically with leeches and do a bit of research. And subsequently, that's led to when I'm doing teaching students, we're doing Ayurvedic modules. We'll introduce one section on Rakta, and we've even done some bloodletting sessions with students. So it's been a fascinating journey. I've really enjoyed it. It's an amazing subject. I thought what would be really good would be to ask Carl to come on and give us or just ask him questions as well, because it's just such a fascinating subject. And although I feel fairly au fait on the Ayurvedic side, I'm not very good on the sort of technical side. So I thought it'd be good to speak to Carl and just get a little bit more information about leeches and what they're doing there. So I think without further ado, over to you, Carl. Do you want to just give people a little bit about your background? I mean, how on earth did you get into a subject like leeches?
Yeah, well, I started here 30, coming up for 33 years ago now, so quite a long time ago. I had my 18th birthday here, but my 50th birthday here, so it's I've been here quite a long time now. I started off as a farmhand, leech breeder, then and now it's sort of evolved to a quality systems manager since we weren't a medical device back in 1993. 1982. Yeah, it's quite a long time.
Is that the technical name from? Is it medical device?
It's a it's a bit strange because in Europe they're classed as a medicine, and that was a little bit. It was a bit silly. I think the EU. I don't know where they got this idea that they were going to. It's probably because of the compounds within the leech, but because they're regulated as a medicine, you can't actually to produce a leech. You can't actually produce them as a medicine.
Okay.
I think I worked it out. It would probably take about 16 to 18 years, and you'd have to keep each leech separate for the whole because of the controls that you actually need. You wouldn't be allowed to mix leeches if fed. You have to feed them individually. And then you'd have to be able to prove that leech was effective. So you'd have to test the leech before we sent it out. But
Oh
obviously,
my God.
once you test it, yeah, it just doesn't work.
I can imagine.
But fortunately, the Americans had the good sense to regulate them as a device. So all the device controls, all the good practice, and everything that goes along with manufacturing device comes to leeches, which is sensible.
Hmm.
So
And
we're licensed as a device.
okay. I remember my day there when you kind of kindly showed me through the process, and I got the feeling that, I mean, initially it's evolved a lot, hasn't it? I think you said as you'd gone on that the process had changed a lot, and you'd had a lot of developments and kind of things that you come up with yourself. You've added new techniques, and
Yeah.
so I mean, how does one go about? I don't understand how it sort of came to be. How did the leech farm?
It started with Dr. Sawyer, who was our founder. He's American. He spent his whole life since he was about 6 or 7 year old collecting leeches and storing leeches. He just loves leeches, and he did his university degree and a doctorate on leeches in Berkeley in California. and then he wanted to go further with his leech work. And there was a doctor in Swansea, and he came over, and he was working at Swansea University, doing research in leeches in Swansea, and he met his wife here, and he's been here ever since. So originally, the thought was that he was going to write his books. He was going to write about leech biology and behavior, which took him 12 years. And then he was going to do research isolating the compounds in the leech saliva. So there's multiple compounds. Harudin is probably the most famous one. There's a platelet adhesion inhibitor. There's lots of different compounds. So he sort of got funding to start a laboratory and research the compounds which he did here, and that went pretty well. They sold the patent to a large German pharmaceutical company who's taken them products further. But the leech business has always been sort of almost like a sideline, because we've always had leeches. He had leeches at the time, and I think it was 1985. Roy had a call from a doctor in Boston, and a young lad had his ear bitten off by a dog. And the doctor had worked in Vietnam, and actually used leeches in Vietnam for reattachments. And if anyone knows, not many people are going to know, when you reattach the capillaries and the veins are so fine, they're beyond microscopic, and then they're really wet and floppy, and they're just impossible to attach. So when you attach a ear, it's almost impossible for it to work, and unless it's a really clean cut, and you're exceptionally lucky. But so you need leeches almost every time. So he managed to get a contact for Roy, give him a call and said, we need some leeches in Boston now. Have you got any? And Dr. Lorna, Dr. Sawyer's wife, they packed him up. They rung the airline. The airline didn't really know what to do, so the pilot took them on board over to Boston, and this young lad's ear was saved.
Amazing.
And the Boston Globe picked up on that then, and then there was a lot of publicity. It was very successful, and sort of the leech sort of business sort of came from that. People had forgotten how well leeches work for that particular type of surgery. And so the company's been sort of ticked over till about 1990. So the leech business is sort of stands its own on ground.
So basically, you had this initial injury. The child had the ear loss, but up until that point, it was more about extracting chemicals from the leech rather than actually using the leech. So like you say, the leech was almost secondary to that. But the reconstructive surgery, I know there's a couple of videos online that they actually take you through. I think it was one lady who was having her toe grafted on where the thumb had been bitten off by a dog or something like
That's
that.
quite common. Yeah,
so that was, and they were just showing literally the leech is acting like a little micro pump, and it's pulling the blood through constantly. There's no way you can mechanically reproduce what a leech does. It just does such a great job.
Yeah, for things like ears and scalps, they are, there isn't another option really. If you're doing it, we have a lot of, we don't have a lot, but we know when they are, because they use a lot of leeches. So people get scalped in the States by bears, and people just go like that, and the bear just rips the scalp off.
Wow.
And again, the only way to do that is they put the scalp back on and they just plaster it full of leeches for about a week. But you use a lot, you use hundreds of leeches for that.
Wow.
So, we know when that's happening, because we can see the stock in the States going down by a large number.
Amazing. And I should mention that you are, and it's an international, you've got branches all over the world, or agents. You're just kind of everywhere. You're like the tentacles of the octopus that have stretched all over the world.
Yeah, and at one point we probably supplied something like 70% of the world's specialist hospitals. I think we're down to about 45% now, but
incredible. Interesting, the leech itself, and it's an incredible feat of evolution. I mean, it's just the way you've got this weird sort of elastic bag that can
Yeah.
stretch. It's just
So the
incredible.
so the so the leech, say you for most microsurgery and plastic surgery, you would not require any leeches at all. So if you'd be in your kitchen and you wield your cleaver and you take off the top of your finger with your meat cleaver, you'd go to any, they'd put you into surgery. They'd be able to reattach it. They'd attach the large artery, which is the sort of size of a biro liner, and they probably attach 18 to 20 very small veins, which are sort of almost like they're thicker than a hair, but they're quite small.
Mm,
And they may put you on some anticoagulants, and everything will be fine,
mm,
hopefully. And most microsurgery goes like that. 95% of surgeries go particularly well. It's only when maybe you put your finger on your bicycle chain
mm,
and you tear the end of your finger off, or
mm,
you cut it with a circular saw, and you lose a section and it becomes damaged. So again, they attach what they can. They
mm,
attach the large artery, which is big. They
mm,
may not be able to attach any veins. So to which point they're hoping that the veins are going to repair themselves. But generally, you've got a problem. So what
mm.
they do is they put the leech on the end of the finger, so the blood's flowing into the artery. The leech makes a little Y-shaped hole, like
Yeah, got your logo there.
that sort of shape.
Hmm.
Um, on each of the jaws is about 125 teeth. It saws its way in fairly painlessly.
Hmm.
It's not like it's not a straightforward bite. It's a saw. Leech farmers used to say that the leech are an anaesthetic. And so I'm of the thought that it's its mode of action rather than it's the anaesthetic. But you can't really feel much when it's sawing the way in. They coat the hole with what they call a platelet adhesion inhibitor, which is a bit like a Teflon coating for blood, so it stops blood sort of sticking to the outside of the hole. It injects in a vasodilator to open up the veins. It injects a very powerful anticoagulant, which is much more. It's got a much smaller molecular weight than heparin or warfarin.
Mm,
It's quite powerful. And then the leech will feed for around 20 minutes.
mm,
It'll take 5, possibly 10 times its body weight, which is for a medical leech is about a teaspoon. It's about 5 mils.
mm,
When that leech comes off, it will bleed for around about 8 to 10 hours, and
mm,
you lose nearly always about 50 mils. So
mm.
the blood is coming in through the artery and dripping out this little hole that the leech has made. And that's enough to keep the finger alive. So in surgery, in a ward, maybe they'll be putting a leech on there every 2 to 4 to 6 hours for
Right.
48 hours, just to keep that tip of the finger alive. And the body just repairs itself. So
Mm.
you're just giving, instead of that area being congested and you just losing the area, you're just keeping that area alive, and the body can repair. So you're just using the leech to borrow a bit of time so the body can repair.
Wow. Yeah, it's a fascinating process to watch. I think on this other video, they cover a couple of other things as well. They've got like the maggots, cleaning the wounds, and then the bee stings.
Yeah.
So I encourage everybody to look those up. I think even your good self appears on there,
Yeah.
even giving a little talk as well. So
Yeah,
worth a look.
I remember that one. Yes, I think it's actually called leeches, bees, and maggots. I think the
I think
program's
you're right.
called.
Yeah, I quite often it's one of those ones that we keep at the college, and that's kind of like part of that module, just to show people to give them kind of a background of what is possible. So
Yeah,
we should mention here also that Dr. Sawyer's books, he did actually finish those, so the biology and the
leech biology and behavior.
yeah.
Yes,
So are they still available? Easily available?
they are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's like a 3 volume set. It's a tome on leeches. You'll never get anything as detailed as that. I
it's
mean,
a weighty reference book.
yeah.
Yeah, books. Yeah,
I mean, I picked my way through it and read the bits that I can understand. I mean, some of it was fascinating. The bit about how they swell and the surface, the pigmentation changes according to sort of UV. The leech will respond to sort of as it's exposing more of its body to light,
yeah,
and even vibrations passing through water or pressure sensors. I mean, there's all kinds of amazing stuff in there. So
yeah.
I encourage everybody to have a read up on those if possible. In relation to I mean, I know it's not particularly, well, it's not your field, Iveda, but in the hospital, what they were saying was, or the doctors were telling me, they said quite often it's what's going in as well, which goes back to this idea about the
Yeah,
leech saliva. They had this idea, or the general idea is that although it's injecting anticoagulants in, there are other chemicals in there which actually aid in
yeah.
this healing process. They use it a lot for like varicose veins or even sort of glaucoma around the eyes. There's all kinds of. So they say that that there are healing elements in that.
That's actually more important than the actual mechanical action of the leech. So um, when the labs were here, we found at least 13 compounds from the leech saliva. So that affects. So that carries on sort of decongesting the area. There's hyaluronic acid in there. There's a vasodilator to open the veins. Plus this the obviously the anticoagulant, and they sort of help the any clots to sort of dissolve and disperse. And they continue for probably around 4 to 5 days after the leeches come off.
Oh, really?
Because we do a lot of oral hematomas, so cauliflower ears, mainly in dogs.
Oh, right.
It's quite common in dogs. They get, they scratch their heads, or
Yeah.
they and particularly with some sort of French bulldogs and dogs that have sticky up ears. When you go to the vet, they tend to syringe the ears, and you tend to lose muscle or cartilage, and the ear flops down, and it never
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've seen it.
it yeah, it doesn't recover. So we supply quite a lot of leeches for oral hematomas, and so with that one, you would have put the leech on. The leech feeds, does its normal thing, and then you leave it sort of 5 to 6 days, and hopefully the ear starts to disperse, and you put a second one on. But they're very effective. And again, for rugby playing ears and that sort of thing, they work pretty well, much better than sort of going to A&E or the doctors and having it syringed, because it just fills back up. You don't have this decongesting properties.
So is this another line? You got the sort of the whole veterinarian thing as well.
Well, we've been supplying them for oral hematomas for we have always been doing it, and we do more dog ears in a week than we do human ears in a year. It's really sad. Wales is a big rugby place, and you see oral hematomas all the time. You know guys with these ears that are just, they almost can't hear, because they just won't they won't entertain the idea of leeches.
Wow. And yet it would be quite a simple procedure. They could just come and see you. You're even in Wales. I mean,
Yeah. Well, we do. So the local rugby teams, they do pop in every now and again. They actually, this seat here is, we've had the captain of the Wales rugby team sit
wow.
in the seat and have his ear done.
Something else I was going to ask you about, I don't know whether is it a truism or not, is we notice when we're using it in the class setting, I mean, I can never really get, obviously you're super fluent with them. I've seen you attach and take them off, and you're just like so second nature to you. When I do it, it's because there's a period between me doing it, I'm always slightly hesitant. It takes me a while to get back into the flow again. But I noticed that if students stay nice and quiet in the room, and there's not sudden movements, and you're not sort of casting shadows on, they bite quicker, they feed quicker, they come off quicker. Whereas the ones where there's a lot of noise and excitement, when everyone's giggling and pointing, the sort of leech slows down, and sometimes it's taken up to 1 hour for them
I would say it's the vibration in your hand. So when somebody's handling a leech, I say generally don't use a glove, just do it with your fingers, and then count in your mind to 15, because that jaw needs to be in one spot for 15 seconds before it starts to bite. So to calm you down, just keep an eye on it. 1, 2. It's a serious amount of time before you need to have it there. But if your hand is shaking, or if you're talking, or you that vibration is passed through to the leech, and it's disorientating the leech, so it's putting it off.
So it is a truism to say that it is good to be quiet. You shouldn't be getting
You need a calm person to put the leech on. If the
Yeah.
person is squeamish, then you're making more work for yourself, really. But if you just count to 15, just watch the head. It's so long.
Yeah.
It's not like a bee that's just going to bite. It's just going to bite. Just sting you. You've got so much time.
I was quite surprised the first time I did it when, because I didn't know what to expect, and it was actually quite painful. I thought, wow, oh, you get this sudden shock, but then nothing. But then it's only at the end when it's sort of detaching. I guess it's just letting go, and then you get that sort of same feeling again.
Yeah.
I
So
was
sometimes
surprised.
if they bite you sort of in the inside of the arm or somewhere on a really thin bit of skin, you can actually feel the bite. I always find the itching afterwards is
Worst bit.
the worst bit. So about 2 or 3 days afterwards, it gets really itchy. But yeah,
I know students used to like keeping the scar, the dried scab that comes off
yeah.
because of the
The,
nice
the Y
shape.
shaped, yeah, yeah. Well, Fred you met, he used to feed all his own buffalo leeches on himself,
Wow.
and they were in a foot long, and he had some really big sort of 5p piece size scars, which he was really proud of.
We should mention here. So Fred Hector he was your sort of resident zoologist. He was sort of like
Yeah,
he was
yeah,
identifying and checking, and he used to. I heard stories of him kind of wading up the Amazon, pulling his trouser leg up, trying to get bitten. And
yeah, yeah. He spent most of his time in India and the Far East. He was interested in the buffalo leech, Hirudinaria madeilensis, and his work on madeilensis is just phenomenal. He was an excellent artist, so he used to draw before photography.
mm.
He used to draw all the salivary glands and the complexes within the leech.
Is this the one? So this was the one where they actually, where the buffalo's feeding it, kind of swims up their nose and then hides in the nasal canal.
Oh no, that's a different one. That's
That's another
called
one.
that one's called limnatus nilotica. That is, that's a leech that lives mainly in cattle and camels. Yeah, that's a big problem because that's a really big leech and it can suffocate you. You see lots of YouTube videos of people trying to yank that out people's nose, and it's
Oh
not
my
good.
God.
We have an equivalent in the UK. It's called Theramizon tessellatum, which is a species that lives on birds. So it lives on ducks.
Oh,
It's a
right.
much smaller leech, but again, it causes the same problem. That particular leech is a live bearing leech, so it holds its young under its belly. And then when the ducks feed, it sort of holds itself like that with all the young under the belly, and then it'll just attach itself to the nose of the duck, and then
Wow.
the little leeches will go up the nasal passages. Obviously, they're going to get 5 to 10 times the size, so it can suffocate the ducklings.
So what are we talking about roughly? How many kind of varieties are there worldwide? Is it generally recognized? What sort of number are we talking
I
about?
think we're in the sort of 670 number now.
But the medicinal leech, the Hirudo medicinalis, which is that is it the I'm not.
There's about 6 fashionable ones that they're using in the middle. We primarily we used to use Hirudo medicinalis, but they were redefined back in 2004. So I was a Hirudo verbana, which is the same leech pretty much. In the Far East, there's Hirudinaria madeilensis, and then there's Hirudo niponia further down towards Australia, or Richardsonii is the other one, but it's a beautiful leech, that one, black and white. But yeah, there are a few species, but Medicinalis of Urbana is probably the best known and the one that's used in hospitals.
I think the ones I remember, or when looking back at the photos I took in Sri Lanka, most of those are kind of the orangey,
Yeah,
yellowy, whereas your ones were kind of like the more greeny, yellowy ones. I mean,
yeah,
there's quite a startling difference between them. And I
yeah,
noticed also that the guy I was working with in Sri Lanka, he specialized a lot in skin conditions, particularly, yeah, people just getting like these recurrent
yeah.
those
Like,
depigmentations and
yeah,
stuff like that. He was finding it really effective for that. So I don't know whether you're obviously that's kind of moving a little bit beyond what the skin.
yeah. I'm familiar with that. We did look at that. I have the opposite problem with them leeches. They cause me a skin irritation. So I get really when I handle that species leech, I get really bad eczema. So I've got to be really. No, normally when I handle leeches, they got an antibacterial in the slime. So I'm not always. Well, I don't try and wash my hands too often because your hands are wet and you don't want to be. But when you handle leeches are generally clean and they're really good. But with that particular leech, they do cause me some irritation. Oddly.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
they're really mucousy as well, so they're which is quite odd. Well, fortunately, we don't have that species here anymore. We used to have quite a lot of them, and they're a nice, easy leech to breed. The only issue is that because they like these hot conditions, they don't have the shelf life in the hospital, and they're more problematical to use. Otherwise, they'd be pretty good, particularly on animals because they like fur.
Interesting.
With Hirta medicinalis and Verbana, if you put them on somebody who's really hairy or an animal, they really try and get away from the fur. They try and find a space without fur. While the Mandalensis will actually just burrow into the fur and be really quite happy.
Wow, I mean, I remember actually I did one guy a long, long time ago who came on one of the students, and yeah, I mean, he had a good, sort of fairly decent amount of body hair, and yeah, it was really problematic. We in the
Yeah,
end, I think he literally had to go for somewhere down, on the
yeah.
arm to get it to bite. So that's I never thought about that at the time, but yeah, I mean, he had a lot of quite coarse body hair, so it was struggling a little bit.
I find leech behavior it's fascinating. I've never stopped learning about leech behavior. Um, Particularly within the same species, and leeches from one area will behave completely different to a leeches from another area, and even the responses to light, vibration, even what they do when you hold them is completely different. We have leeches that from one area that like to flip, so they tense themselves and they flip themselves. They like a banana and a spring, and they
Oh,
just
really?
the same. They're exactly the same species, but yeah. So
What about the sort of classic horseshoe shape that they adopt just when they're sort of getting to that feeding mode? You always see that kind of weird loop. They sort of arch up and
yeah. So they're trying to what they try and do is they try and squeeze them the white cells out. They're trying to get the moisture out of the blood to get to get as many red cells as they can get in. So it's just maximizing their feeding. Because you normally see when they make that arch shape, they normally drip.
yes.
Yeah, so they're just getting rid of the water.
Yeah. So is there any like in Sri Lanka, they'll again when they're during the feeding process, they'll prefer to cover them. They'll wet a piece of cotton and put them over them. But I remember you saying it's probably not necessary. There's so much moisture coming out anyway.
Yeah.
I wonder whether it was like a cover thing, like a protector. They felt a little bit more inclined to feed if they felt they were protected from the
Yeah,
outside.
they may feed for longer, particularly if they're getting a lot of light, because leeches don't like if you give leeches the option, they'll feed on a shaded side rather than a bright side.
Interesting sideline as well. When we were in Japan, my wife, she's quite friendly with a Campo doctor over there. So he uses leeches, and we were just talking to him about leeches. And of course, I got all excited that they were going to be applying leeches, and I thought I might see a different variety here. But they were dried leeches, so they were actually making a tea from them. So you get a bag, literally a big, a vacuum packed bag full of these fairly substantially sized leeches, all completely, I mean, super rigid, just absolutely desiccated. And then they just brew them into this tea. How do you see that working? Again, is there something that could be reactivated in the tea, like a decoction? Would there be something? How would that work?
Uh, there's a lot of things to worry about, but yeah, I don't know. That's such a strange because you have a leech that's obviously taken a meal from somewhere, and you're drying the whole animal. So yeah, I don't know. I'd be more worried but it would taste absolutely foul. If you ever smell dried leeches, they just smell foul.
Yeah, I'm just curious to try it. But I said to him, what's the main use for these? So in Campo, it's very effective what they call wind in blood. So that means aggravated blood or blood that's clotting or vitiating. So they would see it as like a tumor. So it's
Okay.
good for like tumor reduction. So they'll use it for, I'm not saying cancer therapy, but it would be like tumor reduction, reducing coagulated or clots or lumps in the body and stuff like that. Removing like lipoma, like fat
Yeah.
tissue. Yeah, in a tea. I mean, of course, everything in Chinese medicine is some sort of decoction usually. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you would be getting the anticoagulants from the leeches.
but it's
Um,
not something you'd be readily excited about trying. You wouldn't swap that for your Earl Grey.
no, no, no. I know what they smell like, and I know what they taste like, and it's not pleasant at all.
Near where my wife's parents live in Japan, they have a leech shrine. So that's a shrine dedicated. Everyone in the area goes there like
Ah,
once a year, and they do a little prayer and ritual. And I said, "Can you translate what it said?" And it said, many years ago they had an epidemic there, and it was cured by leeches. And so the god of the leeches sort of
hmm.
gave himself to the people so they could get cured. So there's still this little shrine there where people go sort of once a year, or just you can go there any time, but you put some money in a box and ring the bell and sort of
Yeah.
clap your hands, and then it's all good for the leech.
That's sort of like what happened in the UK, in the UK in the Dark Ages, a bit like it's that time when they believed in bloodletting, and then the doctor was the last person you saw, because they generally bled you to bring your body back into balance with the four humours, and then they went to leeches, and then they found that they were seeing lots of blood, and people were living after they put leeches on them, and they believed the leeches only removed the good blood. So yeah, it was just similar to that, really. Yeah,
Interesting how these kind of things, just how they all arrive, isn't it? That's just sort of this
yeah,
lineage of. I mean, even the Ayurvedic god, called Dhanvantari, he's holding a leech in one hand. He has like a pot of medicine in one hand and a leech in the other. So obviously, the leech was venerated as a.
yeah,
In those ancient texts, it talks a little bit about like how to identify a leech. So they were just doing it. The water should be clear, should be sweet tasting. You should have nice flowers growing in that water. Avoid black leeches or avoid grungy looking leeches or sort of drippy, slimy ones. But I mean, I wonder how many varieties would they probably be having access to over there? Would it just be kind of a random thing? Do you think they were just instinctively picking the right ones, or?
that's a good question. That the Asian medicine age is very common in good numbers. So I imagine they probably were picking the right one.
Mm.
A lot of the leeches that feed on things like earworms and sort of insects and things, they are quite a floppy. They're quite a floppy, flat leech. They're not a nice
Mm.
good-looking leech.
I mean, they got these great descriptions on them. They just say, it should look like this. The water, you just taste the water that leaches, and if it's sweet and
Yeah,
it's very clean,
yeah.
and you've got nice abundant nice flowers growing around it, that's a good sign. It means it's a
Yeah,
nice.
and that isn't, probably that would work quite well because a lot of the other types of leeches, they live in that sort of more stagnant-y water that you'd find, other aquatic life in, and they'd feed on them. So yeah, that's probably a good description.
How about in regards to the life cycle of the leech? Generally, what in natural conditions, under natural conditions, what sort of length of life would a leech be expected to have? And during that life, how many times would they feed? I mean, how many? I know leeches have got the crop that
Yeah.
and they can survive for a long time after a feed. So, what's the sort of
Yeah,
cycle?
that's quite an interesting question, and I think that depends on what the climate of that, because out of Medicinalis and Verbana have got such a large geographical range, and they've got a huge temperature range. Generally, a leech needs to feed probably on average once every 6 to 8 months, regardless of its life stage. They can go 2, 3, 4 years without feeding,
Mhm,
depending on its life stage and depending on the temperature.
mhm,
I would say a leech in the wild would probably breed when it was about 5 or 6 years old, and
mhm,
it may have fed 10 times in that period,
mhm,
something like that. But generally, they sort of a leech that's sort of um, maybe 5 grams in weight and about 3 years old will only feed once a year or once every 18 months at best.
mm.
And it'll be seasonal, so it'll feed in the warmer times when it can get hold of something, and it'll just go to the bottom of the pool, sit in the mud, or sit somewhere really quiet
Mm.
until through the winter, and then feed again the following year in
That's
this
incredible, isn't it?
in this sort of climate. But obviously in warmer climes it may feed more often than that.
Wow. So just take us through the life cycle of, I saw cocoons in your tanks, and then you saw the baby ones, and then you were doing like a little pre-feed before they went out. And
Yeah.
what's the sort of talk us
So
through the rough
the
life
so the, so
cycle?
the, so the leech copulates in water, so it breeds in water.
Hmm.
It's both male and female, so they a bit like an earthworm, so they fertilize each other.
Hmm.
In the wild, that they come out into the reeds, so we have a little shelf with a with some moss or coconut fiber or something near both, and they lay the cocoons in the coconut fiber. The we, Once they're collected, they take around, depending on temperature, 3.5 to 4 weeks, by which time you can see a clear edge to the cocoon.
Hmm.
And then we will just either take the top off the cocoon and let the young come out, or we'll just let the young come out naturally. And then they're fed then about a month after that,
Hmm.
2 months after that, depending on the temperature. And then it'll be 3 months or so, or 3 months to a year after that we'll do the other feed, depending on when we need them.
Mm.
And then depending on what size they are, some will be graded for sale at that point, and some will be refed, and they'll have another year. We grade probably 10-15,000 leeches a week. My hand is broken, so we're literally sorting out, because they starve at different rates. So we're sorting out big one, small one, fat one, thin one, and each tank after about 6 to 8 months will be you'll have little ones and big ones, and they'll need more constant grading. But yeah, that's actually is the mainstay of our work is trying to get the leeches to starve down evenly and to get them within the same size, because when we ship them out empty, so there's nothing left in the gut,
Mm.
because they have this gut flora that can cause a problem. What we do is we make sure the gut is empty, so that there's less presence of this gut flora. So generally, everything we send is starved for 6 to 9 months, up to about 2.5
Wow.
years.
So they're really voracious by the time they get to you. It's like they're,
They're ready to go. Yeah,
yeah.
you don't want the leeches messing around. You just want to put it on, and off it
Wow.
goes.
I've seen obviously you got the warning on there about the Aramonius, isn't it? The gut bacteria.
Yeah.
I mean, just generally across the board. I mean, do you ever get anybody that's ever had a reaction to this? But it's very unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's common, but we probably get one every 2 or 3 years. Um, but it's just what normally happens is that when you're having each treatment, they treat prophylactically with an antibiotic.
Mm.
So it is we're always aware of it.
It's
Um,
nothing irregular though. It's a natural thing. I mean, the leeches
it's
just got that.
it's part of their normal gut.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's always good to use a leech as empty, and it's always when a leech is feeding, you just let it feed.
Mm.
You don't squeeze it or do anything with it once it's fed. So
Mhm.
you just want that leech to feed and drop off, and then the bleeding to wash the area, and it's fine.
And we should say in the Western or practice over here, obviously they're destroyed once they've done their job. That's it.
Yeah.
Whereas Ayurvedically, if you go to a clinic over there, it's quite common for you to have the leech follow you through the process. So basically,
Yeah.
they bleed them afterwards by sprinkling a little bit of turmeric on them or a little bit of rock salt. It makes them vomit, and then they put them in a copper jar or a copper pot, or just wash them with turmeric water. And it seemed a little
Yeah.
bit.
So yeah. So when the leech has got blood in its gut, it's got a good presence of the bacteria. So it's not ideal to you really always want to be using an empty leech.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I was a bit sort of horrified when I saw because I had after they used my one, they put my name on it. I mean, I didn't have a second feed or anything, but he said that would then be followed around through the treatment and used again. So it's just being used with you and nobody else. But I remember
Yeah.
thinking at the time, I thought, oh, but I mean that's just what's prescribed in the text. They just say
Yeah,
with
and
turmeric.
that wouldn't actually be too bad if the leech was empty this when you use it the second time.
Mm.
And that's actually not quite so bad for the buffalo leech or the Asian leech, because the digestion is quicker. So
Oh, really?
you could possibly turn that round in about two months maybe.
Oh, so it's just I mean, once it's feeding on the blood, it just digests it quicker than.
Yeah, so it's a much quicker process. That's why the main reason why we were originally working on that leech, because you've got a much quicker turnaround. Whenever I see sort of market farms, I think, oh, there's money in that. 72 hours from start to finish. We've got hours for 4 or 5 years sometimes. They're between start and finish, so they're with us, and we're moving them all the time. But yeah,
Wow.
but the Asian ones are a lot because of the temperature. Metabolism is quicker.
Is there somebody doing that over there? I mean, I noticed a couple of people online on Instagram talking about
Yeah, I imagine
certified
so.
leeches.
Yeah, yeah, I would have thought so. Well, it's a fairly simple process with that particular type of leech.
Mm,
It's just that doesn't work in the West because of
I
the
know. And how do you cope with the water thing as well? Obviously, you can't just use mains water because of the chemicals in there. So you're having to use how do you deal with that? When you're.
well, actually we use mains water, but not in the leaches. So it comes in, and it's fortunately the water in Wales is absolutely beautiful. They actually make soy sauce, the only place outside Japan, apparently, a few miles up the road, because the water is so good.
Oh.
So it's just a question for us just to take the chlorine out of the water, and then it's good.
When I've received stuff, you've got this. It's quite interesting the way you pack them in this. There's a special gel that you use, so you're adding a little bit of just water to like crystals, isn't it? And it kind of turns into like a gloopy
Yeah, yeah,
sauce, which allows them to be transported
yeah.
without.
We used to send them in moss, and then yeah, we came to this sort of the same sort of stuff that they use in nappies or hanging basket moisture retaining crystals. Yeah, it's just a different grade. Yeah.
So they don't get too much of a rough ride. They're kind of like nice packed in
It
gel, and
just
then.
keeps them moist, and then it allows them to have a wee on the way because you're shaking them about, and the skin comes off. So it's just keeping them clean so they can until they get there.
Well, it's been a fascinating thing for me. I've really enjoyed. I mean, I wish I had more time to devote to it, and I love talking about them, and I love demonstrating, and I love seeing what they're doing. It's such an amazing creature, really. I mean, it just seems like everything. There's always something new to
Yeah,
discover with them. So,
yeah.
what's the sort of any plans for the future? I mean, are you developing a new kind of like special hybrid or anything like that, or is there anything coming up in?
We've done we've tried hybrids, and we've tried selectively breeding leeches. It's gone wrong more times than it's gone right. I produced a beautiful leech about 8 years ago. As I thought we supply leeches for fishing.
Mhm.
So all our waste stock, all our waste breeding stock goes. So it would be nice to have a leech with a really big hind sucker, because they put the hook through the hind sucker. So we spent quite a long time producing this leech, and we selected them by using running water in the breeding chamber. So the leeches that went through the running water and were able to climb up into the moss
Mhm.
had bigger suckers. So when we produced them, they had bigger suckers, which sounds great
Mm.
until you supply them to the NHS, because these big suckers stick like nobody's business rubber gloves. You can't get them off.
So literally just stretching
Yeah.
them like rubber
Oh yeah,
bands.
they were lovely. They were nice and aggressive. They did everything apart from they stuck. Couldn't get them off the rubber gloves. I literally
Wow.
you pull a hole in your rubber glove trying to get them, because the sucker was probably about 30-35% bit larger than a normal leech.
Wow. It's unintended consequences, isn't it? When you
It
start
is,
kind of
yeah.
reading stuff, there's
And
always.
that's 6 years gone.
So how about is there anything to do like take an example like koi carp, where they've got special types of marking on them, and certain types of marking were
Oh
more
yeah, I like to bring.
medicinal.
We like to produce a nice looking leech.
So is it
There's no
is that
point in producing rubbish. They got to be nice looking.
it's the Rolls Royce of leeches you're doing?
Yeah, yeah. You don't put ugly leeches in the breeding chamber, or you wanna go for some. Yeah,
So if you see anything particularly beautiful, you might kind of pair it up with another one that's equally and try and get a better
yeah,
a better patterning.
yeah. We wouldn't put any. Yeah, put the best looking ones in there. Yeah,
Wow. I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? It's almost like a whole, like almost like living works of art now as well. I mean, I
yeah,
find them
and you
fascinating.
can probably see that through and when you look at old pictures, so when you look at pictures now, leeches have got suddenly have got better looking throughout the years.
Mm.
People have been selecting their better looking leeches for breeding.
Wow, amazing. I should ask you this actually from the point of view of somebody who's interested in doing this, like say if an Ayurvedic practitioner, what's the kind of legal ramifications of can somebody approach you and buy a leech to
Oh.
do it
So
themselves, or how does that work?
so we do supply leeches for private work. There's a disclaimer form that they'll need to fill in and send back to us before they can access the web shop. It basically goes through the bacteria
Mm,
and tells you about the risks.
mhm,
But as a homeopathy type, we do supply them.
mm.
That's something that is beyond the scope of the license for the leech. So it's not something that we're happy to supply them as long as people know the risks.
I
Yeah,
think just getting feedback from students, they're interested to see it, but I think it's highly unlikely that any of them would ever do it per se. You know, they love to get the experience of seeing it, but it's not
yeah,
something that they're necessarily going to use. I mean, I know there are people that do use them fairly regularly, and they're very very happy with the results they're getting. It's not something that I've seen people go on to do. So
yeah,
from our point of view, it's more of an instructional thing, just to say this is what you would see if you're in India, and it's quite a nice. It's a fascinating thing to see at least once, and then students are very happy that they get access to that. So eternally grateful for you for
thank
supplying
you.
those for us. That's great. So if people wanted to get some more information, you've got your website,
Have a look. Yeah,
Biopharm website. I'll put the link up for that. Dr. Sawyer's books, of course, highly recommend. If
yeah.
you're really kind of like up for some serious information about
That's
leads.
serious technical stuff. Yeah.
So there's that, and yeah. So if people if they want to get hold of you, could they just kind of email you through the website if they've got questions or something like that? Are you kind of available for taking?
A little bit. It can take a few weeks for me to reply, but yeah, yeah.
Carl's a very busy man. It's not easy to get hold of him, so I
But
appreciate
most of my time is spent wet rather than on the computer.
it. Fantastic. Well, look, it's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for giving up your time to talk to us today. Really appreciate that. Always fascinating. And I'm sure people will really appreciate this. And I'll put up lots of images as well. I'll cut those in and put them at the end so people can see what we were talking about visually as well, which is great. So, yeah, appreciate
Cheers,
your time.
Andrew. I'll speak to you in the new year.
Yeah, thank you very
Cheers.
much.
Bye.